Hi, my name's Benyas. I'm currently serving as the president of Denver Council PTSA. I would ask our board members that are here to please raise their hand and identify themselves. Ronnie is our vice president. Annette is our secretary, and Craig is our treasurer. I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Sampson. I said it right that time. And she is going to give us great inspiration and good thinking thoughts to help all of us develop our work plans. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I want to anchor in the fact that you've already done, this is our fourth session, and they really are intersectional and they run together. So it's going to be important as you build out the work on the internet and your links or in your recordings, that people know what was 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I think you've already started on that because you'll go back and take a look at it. What I did tonight for everyone was to, I wanted to reiterate the equity charge of the PTSA, but also I created a checklist that encompasses our first and through fourth session. And so I'm going to leave that with you tonight in order to have sort of a template, a rubric of work that each PTSA or PTA can start to look at their work and they know sort of a roadmap. And so that's what I had planned for this evening. But I also am looking forward to those who have started the work. And I don't know if anybody's on the Zoom at this point who have started the work, but when I get done with anchoring the checklist, I really am interested in hearing about how did that go, what's happening, where are you at, and I also think it's, since some people did not show up, it's recorded information for others to look at too, and hopefully get some inspiration from in terms of some next steps. So I'm just going to jump in unless Ronnie and Craig have something before I go. Okay.
I just wanted to welcome you for coming and welcome you and thank you for coming and being a part of this process as we move forward to become a more inclusive organization, a more inclusive group, because it's really important that as we move forward, if we want to have different types of people as leaders, that we do the work ourselves and making sure we learn how to welcome people properly. So I really appreciate you for coming, and I appreciate you for taking out your precious time to come and work with us, because, you know, I've learned a lot along the way, and I know I still have so much more learning to do. And I just really appreciate it.
Great. You're going in and out a little bit, Ronnie, but I think I heard you, and I absolutely enjoy being here, and hopefully this will be some good information for you today. So I'm going to share with you the sort of a foundational place that we're going to start today, and we're going to just jump right into the work. And I'm calling it Taking Equity on the Road, because while you are the Denver Council, you're going to be taking equity on the road in lots of different spaces, to other people, to parents, to students, to all different areas. And so it's sort of just an acronym for we really have work to do and to take equity on the road. And today, I really want to sort of draw everything together and then leave you, like I said, with that roadmap. And I'm going to make sure that I drop things in the chat so that you can see them. I don't have a long presentation, but I want to make sure that I've gone over the main areas from the first session to the fourth. So this is what we've done today. We had our grounding session. And then my colleague, Dr. Hernandez, came in and focused on the cultural and linguistic needs of Latinx and Black families. She talked about excellence plans. Not everybody has those around the state, but Denver Public Schools does. And I just recently heard that the kids in Inglewood went forward to push for ethnic studies. They want to hear history. They want to understand history. So this push and kids acknowledging that they really want to hear and understand is all over the country. And then Dr. Hernandez did some preparation for equity plans. And then today I'm going over a checklist and ways to check progress as you continue building the plan. This is not without understanding that there are a lot of issues and challenges that have to be addressed. But because we were focusing on EDI work, equity, diversity, and inclusion, our plans are focusing on the equity, laser focused ways of making sure that equity is embedded in planning. But equity wraps around everything you do. So whatever you choose to do is not on a shelf over here. Like, okay, we'll look at it and we'll invoke it when we want to. It runs up through and all over all the things you will plan for, because who are the kids that are most challenged often or struggling or navigating different systems are the kids who are marginalized, minoritized, kids who are seeking accessible education, kids who are struggling. But when we plan for the kids who are most struggling, we plan for all kids because that's the proxy. That's like our anchor for doing the work. And so that's why we focus on equity too, because of what needs to happen. And then here's a reminder of some of our previous collaborative agreements that I talked about at the very first session, because equity work can be intrusive. It can be time consuming. And as soon as we think we have it right, something else is going on, something else to learn. It's a lifetime of work. I'm 100 years old and I still have work to do, ongoing. I might even be steeped in certain research, but I still have work to do. So we want to pursue positive intentions, which is higher standard than assumption. It's jumping up higher, saying, okay, I'm gonna give people the benefit of the doubt, and I'm gonna figure out whether I need to call in or call out. And we want to take what's learned to our spaces, schools, the people, whoever we interact with, and knowing that equity work takes time. And it usually generates more questions than answers. So you have to pace yourselves. And then working on behalf of our kids from their strengths and not their deficits, so important. To just wrap that around what we do. And we cannot forget our own inner work, because that's separate. We simultaneously plan and support, but then we got our own stuff to work on. That's important as well. And all of our families, all of the differences in our schools have a right to be present at the diversity table. It's not even inviting them to the table. They should just be at the table because they have a right to be at the table. So how you do that is going to be important. I'm going to share with you 2 acknowledgements so that I think acknowledges helps us to understand what has come before us. And there's a lot of pushback on that now, not paying attention to it or wanting to dilute it or pretend things didn't happen. So I'm going to share 2 acknowledgements with you, and I'll let you read them yourself. I don't need to read them to you. So that acknowledgements tells us, be aware, think globally, think largely, think beyond the table that is presented in front of us. Think beyond the people that we just see all the time. Who are we planning for? This is the first one. Okay, just give me a thumbs up when you're ready. So telling hard truths is a part of our equity plans. May not make it feel beautiful. Wow, we just want to have a fundraiser. Well, but you might have to focus on kids who have these needs or that needs, or disproportionate discipline that we don't want to talk about, who's in the principal's office all the time. So sometimes as we do acknowledgement, it helps us to think about our part in the glaring inequities. Here's your second one. That's a hard acknowledgement. This is why people don't want to talk about historical perspectives. But as you're planning, it says, anchoring where we are now, think about the past, but also think about how well we can go and move toward the future and what we're doing well. So it's not just one or the other. Let's not talk about the past. It's the past. It's like a story, the middle, and where we're going in the future, which is like the Sankofa bird. Have anybody heard about that? The Sankofa bird has his feet planted backwards, but his head is facing forward. So he or she pulls in history and moves forward at the same time. If you just look up the Sankofa, S-A-N-K-O-F-A bird, you will find how the anchors of the feet go backward and the head goes forward. And that's a part of what we're talking about today. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the equity checklist that I built out for you. And I'm hoping you can send it around to your all the groups that you have and all the people that have attended, because I think we've had different people at different times. Is that correct? And so we don't always have the same people. And actually in the research, there's research around how when not the same people plan, the work doesn't get done well. Because people are, moving in and out. One person brings their perspective, the next week they're not there, or month. Nobody documents and keeps clarity. And then before you know it, the person's like, I'm tired of this PTSA. I'm not working on there anymore. They're gone. It's kind of like principals, kind of like superintendents. So the documentation of your work is going to be so important as a living document to leave for other people, but not just that, of the work that you do and how well you are moving forward. So I'm going to leave this checklist with you, and let me see if I can drop it in the chat so you can look at it. Let's see if this will work. And it is, I only see Google Drive, Dropbox. It's not in my Google Drive. File is what I'm looking for. Let's try Microsoft OneDrive. Yeah, it's just not showing up. Do you know why file is not working? Anybody?
On Zoom?
Well, when you go into the Dropbox, you can place, you can pick from your documents,
Okay,
and that's not offered as an option. You may not have that kind of Zoom.
I may not.
On mine, I can just pick from my file.
Okay, yeah, we
So,
may not have that option.
okay. Okay, well then what I'm going to do is exit the screen for a minute and open the file, and hopefully I can share it with you. And that way, and then I can send it to whoever wants me to put it on the list. I guess we could do it like that. Okay. Can you see it? Okay. So, and I'll make sure that I send it afterwards since you don't have the file option. So,
Dr. Sampson,
yes,
I just wanted to say real quick that I also have it in the email that you sent to me, these documents.
yeah,
So I just wanted to let you know I have it as well. So we can duplicate it and send it out to
Send
the
it out.
different PTAs and PTSAs as well.
that would be great. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it because we're already at 7 and I want to hear how anybody's doing or what's going on. But what I did, the checklist is sort of long, but what I would suggest is that it's shared with the different PTAs and they start to look at it in terms of, wow, okay, let's make sure we're doing these things. It's developmental, so it starts on page 1 that you see here. And so you're starting to check off, okay, have we done these things before we even start creating our equity plan? So it says, as you begin to build plans of actions for your school, please utilize a checklist to plot the steps of developing a plan. It's not like we just jump right in and get going, okay, we're gonna do this or that. You have to have data, there's discussions, and some people maybe have moved ahead, some people aren't where they need to be, some people might be done, but I needed to sort of show the continuum of the work. So your first thing is to determine your why. What are we doing this for? And for who? And what population? What expertise each individual brings, because you need to document what resources you have, the alignment with existing goals and needs. If you've never had an equity mission statement or goals, how can you plan an equity plan? So that's important. And what members are engaged and will work the plan, and what the school culture can operationalize and manage. So some school cultures, people are so stressed right now with the pandemic and teachers are exhausted and about to fall on the ground. They don't want to hear anything about no plan right now. They maybe will be ready when they come back in the fall, but you could be working on it on the summer around how can you start to build a plan that's viable? What's your budget for the plan? You got to have some money, some fundraising, something. And in the box that's bolded, I'm giving you an equity assessment data checklist. And that checklist will have you ask questions about your school to kind of determine how are they doing. So it's sort of a pre-checklist to determine how are they doing, to give you some ideas of what needs to be worked on. Just because the school says these are our major issues doesn't mean that the data proves that to be the truth, or that that's where you need to go. Yes, it's great if you can work in collaboration with your school, but that's not always the case. So the equity assessment data checklist is a space to start to say, let's just sit down and talk together how we think our school is doing. And that's for your own information to give you better understanding about how well they're doing. And then here's some check fors. I put those in from the time that I started with you to tonight. We want substantive work. You can't just write a mission statement. There's no equity plan. You can't write an equity plan. You have no goals. You can't write a beautiful thing about the school, but yet a particular population is being marginalized. So that's what performative is when we have written something or engaged in something, but it's really not what's necessary. And you're going to do the check for. So you start at the top of the checklist and keep working down to get to your final checklist. And I'm just going to go through this because I'm not going to go through all of it, because I will send it to you and you have it. Then you're going to check for, do we have an equity-minded philosophy? What's the language you're using? Have you named what you're talking about? Can you name it? I went to a conference where it was about disproportionality of Indigenous children being sent to the office over other children. Not once did they say Native American children, but that's who they're talking about. They almost seemed afraid to talk about it. When you're talking about inequities, you have to say what they are. Families and students be invited to the table that you're writing about, engaging about, and supporting. Check to make sure they're there, and then ask who's missing. And sometimes if a population is not coming in for meetings, they're working, or have other desires, or they don't trust, or they don't know, whatever it is, sometimes you have to go to them. You might have to call, do surveys. People don't generally like surveys. You might be outside the school when parents come and say, how are you doing? I just want to let you know I'm a member of the PTSA and just want to check in with you. How is the school meeting you need? Do you like things? And then check for knowledge of your school data, numbers of teachers. You need to know all this demographic data about your school before you plan for it. Who has certification? Who doesn't? It's hard to get, but it's even important to know, what if every day a whole bunch of kids are doing well in one class, but in the other class, a whole bunch of kids are getting sent out? So you kind of need to know the culture of what's happening. If you can find out, check for fears and anxieties that undermine equity work. That includes roles and shared responsibilities, empathy, and make sure that it's strengths-based and collaborative. And then we can't forget the differences. I put a whole bunch in the box. There's so many others, but here are some of the differences that make a difference, that we know people more likely to not think about or don't focus on. Here's some of the differences that while you're planning, you may find that these are some of the things that you need to do to make sure that equity is embedded in what you do. I'm going to skip this tab because I shared it with you before. And I want to get to beginning your equity plans. So here again, I say 1, 2, 3. The little checks, circles going down are to be checked as you get to them and have discussions, conceptualizing your plan with data, observations, interviews, and not just data, authentic stories, finding them out. What do families need? What's happening? What are the gaps? What service issues exist? And think about the tools you will utilize to build your plan. So you're going to gather your focus points. And even between the first 2 bullets and the third, that's a whole bunch of work to prepare. It's not, I'm just putting it in bullet format, but gathering stories and data and information and who needs what and what kids are doing well and what kids aren't doing so well. And 20% are barely on grade level and all those kinds of things you need to know when you're building your plan so that you can decide which is the most viable. So these are some of the things that are important to do. And you never thought you had to do all this research, but you have to analyze the themes, what keeps coming up over and over that we're not paying attention to. And really, I would say 3 goals, maybe not 400, because you can't make them. It's too difficult. You'll get discouraged and people will fall off the process, and then a time frame. When you do your plans in the box, watch for gendered language. Donuts with dads. What if you don't have a dad? For some people, this is even harder. What if you have 2 dads? Okay, so we're going to have to pay attention to maybe perhaps some different configurations of families. when I was growing up, we had 4,000 people involved with us, and they were not all biologically related to me. They took care of me and were my village. And some kids don't have a village at all, but they may have friends and relatives. And what's the configurations when you're paying attention to them? And so you're going to plan for others. Don't plan for others. Watch for planning for others, yet they have no input. So you shouldn't be planning for populations that you don't have a connection with. And here again, you're going to watch for performative activities. So people love Cinco de Mayo afternoon, Rosa Parks Day, the cultural nights where we all bring food or share arts and crafts. That really doesn't, it's nice, but it doesn't do a lot to change systemic issues. And so if you could do both, people could feel good, but also they have to work on things. So we're going to watch for deficit language. People love the word at risk, achievement gaps. I like resilience. Students who are managing systems, kids who are culturally vibrant, not, I wouldn't say bad or wild or difficult, and caring families. So the language in your plan is so important. Unhoused or person experiencing homelessness, not that homeless person. Person first, because it's the individual first. So those are some of the language things to pay attention to. And I won't go over all of these, but as you sustain your plan, make it time limited and focused. So you're checking out and seeing how you're doing at intervals. And you may have gaps as a PTSA that you need more training for. That happens. You get into it and you're like, I don't even know if we know really this issue well. Maybe we don't understand this. What are we going to need? So you may have to do that attached to your goals, that you'll have some sort of support. It could be around dual language. It could be about Black parents. But people who don't come, they could still advise you. They could still support you. You could still ask them questions. So we want to make sure that we just don't go, oh, they're not at the table. They don't come. Oh, they don't care about their kids. When they have a lot to offer. So when you choose your goals, I keep going too fast here. When you've completed the pre-work, that's everything above there in the box. Don't overwhelm your PTSA. List the sample goals. And it's great if you can make them intersectional. 2 to 3 goals, maybe. Okay, not everybody has the resources to do that. Any questions before I go to the goal sheet? That's a lot of information. Your eyes are glazing over. Are you okay? Everybody okay?
You
Doing
said,
great.
did you say before you go to the what part? I didn't hear
The
that.
sample goal sheet.
Okay.
Okay, so
Dr. Sampson, just to agree with you through most of this, there is a unexpectedly high amount of additional effort, and you're illuminating that through these steps and goals right now. But it is, again, it's good to see it laid out like this. And I think that a large part of our work with you is to get this type of information in front of our units so that we have a starting place, because I think that a lot of questions that we've heard time and again is we want to be involved with this, or we feel that this is important to our community, but we don't know where to start. So thank you very much for laying everything out like this, even if it's a lot.
Yes. Well, do a disclaimer and tell them that I was not trying to wear them out. But when you do start to really create goals, they take time. They're not just sort of written down. So I include the sheet with, what I did was, you could practice on a sheet like this, but I just wrote all different goals, although there would just only be one per sheet. So work in collaboration with the school to develop 5 diversity speakers, assist the school in reviewing curriculum for inclusivity, develop a family reading or career night. So these are just some different things that you could do specifically to put on this goal sheet. So at the top, you have the goal, and then at the bottom, you have here the action steps, how you're going to get to the goal, who will do it, and the deadline, so that you don't lose track of what you do. And all that Black writing is just a whole bunch of different types of goals. I'm just giving you samples, but there would just be one per page that you're following. You got to have some budget, some money for outreach, to get some affirming text, to do some door prizes, to have food. I don't know what all you want to have, but you've got to figure out what your resources are in collaboration with schools or on your own. And you have to evaluate it. And I gave you a sample. We will strive for a 20% increase in parent guardian attendance at PTA meetings by blank. That could be a goal. And you will do these things by action. I just made that up. That's a big goal. So don't get discouraged. The blank PTA, that's a school, will conduct outreach via doing this, this, and this to 25 families. Maybe it's 5. But you could do something like that. That also is towards your equity goal. It doesn't have to be that it's just anchored in academics, because a lot of times folks of difference, folks of color, they want relationships first. They want to see where you're coming from, as opposed to, okay, let's just do this percentage. And so we want to make sure that we are doing something that's obtainable and measurable. And so I put samples in the box, but you would have one goal per page and list your progress. So not all school districts have Black excellence plans, but DPS is really trying. I wrote a whole bunch of different things you could do to have at least one equity goal anchored in a Black excellence plan, a category. So these are just sample things I came up with off the top of my head, having worked in schools for a long time. Some of the ways that we could start to connect with Black children and families. And when I say Black, I also mean kids from the Caribbean, all different places that would be considered Black or described as Black. And so their experiences could be very different in terms of what they're needing linguistically and culturally, but there tends to be a lumping, even though lots of cultural differences. So here's some ideas for Black excellence plans. Plan a day in conjunction with the input of Black families and educators, showcasing historical figures. Create a parent university in which BISOC, Black, Indigenous students of color, talk about their lives, roles, supports. And we don't always have to be deficit-based. What about those kids who are just really doing well? What about those kids who are struggling, who are doing well and hanging in there? That's resilience, that's grit. So here's some ideas to start the thinking. Although you might look at math and literacy and where kids are falling off the continuum of performance, you could still do some things that really do create a relationship where people go, well, that PTA isn't so bad, and look what they did, and look how they reached out, and I don't know if I trusted, but that connected with me. And that's often what people are looking for, is to see who you are and how you show up on behalf of all students. So here's some of the activities. And this is page 8 of the whole document of different things you could do to support Black excellence plans. Any questions? That's a lot, and you have it. Let me stop sharing so I can see your faces, see if you're still with me, you're still breathing. How are you doing? Okay. Any questions? Okay, we only got 10 minutes or so. There's one more document that will be shared with you. It's an equity assessment of what your school looks like, that you would take a look at and say, you know what, we're really doing well in this area, but in this area, not so well. And it could help you decide on your goals and plans. But I just wanted to give it to you, and it's listed together. I've sent it out together, but it's listed in the first part of your plan to give you some ideas of where to look. not everyone came who signed up, but is there anyone that is into their plans, has started some planning, is thinking about the planning? Does anybody want to share how things are going? Yes.
So mixed bag. When I got involved with Denver Council and met Ronnie, and was made aware that there were DEI committee chair positions at PTSAs, I made it a goal to find someone to occupy that role at my local PTSA at Dormore. And it was much more fraught than I thought it would be. There was a lot of reluctance. More or less, there was a lot of discomfort with me being frank about what I thought that the role should entail or who I thought should be occupying the position. And I ended up finding a parent who has 3 children at our school, and she has a child in my son's grade. And we were able to get her on the board and operating this year. And her questions were exactly what you've been answering all tonight. Well, what do we do? And as much as I have Ronnie as this amazing resource for doing this, I know that from a local standpoint, you need to really make it work for your group specifically. And Crystal did an amazing job this year. We did host a cultural night, which we hadn't had at the school before, but it was, just with COVID restricting so much, it was one of the only things that our school even did that brought the community together. So even if it was, focused around the Day of the Dead, it was something that was absolutely fantastic. And I really felt the community appreciated having that opportunity. And then we got into winter, and then we got into spring, and we were working on what we might do. And the momentum was slow. And we eventually applied for and received a fund from the Capitol Hill United Neighborhoods Association for a grant for some books on diversity. And so we spent $1,000 on a whole lot of diverse books, and we are trying to establish a section in our library to emphasize this particular subset of books so that people in our community who are in our library will have a very easy frame of reference on where they can find books that may represent characters and stories that more accurately resemble their own experiences. And Crystal's not necessarily on board for coming back next year. And I do not believe it's going to be easy to find somebody else to come in. We're struggling just to find people to be on our board in general. Our members.
Why is she deciding it's just too much right now? And
Yep.
could you give her a tiny little piece? Like I always say, carve out this little tiny piece that she still stays engaged. She maybe doesn't come every time, but she's emailing and connecting with you. There's some little piece that she could do to transition.
I'm working on that. Crystal's a wonderful woman, and I recognize 3 children like I have is a lot to deal with. I also I recognize the fact that COVID really took a lot of steam out of a lot
everything.
Of engagement. We just recently had another after school activity, which was our first since the cultural night. And that was like a 4-month gap. And everybody was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is what you all look like. And oh, that's what your kid looks like, because I hear about him every day when I get home. And everybody really had this sense of togetherness. And I'm hoping that when we get into next year, we can build some momentum around that. I'm certainly going to keep Crystal engaged. She has volunteered that she would still help with some different activities. But when it came to actually putting together a plan and getting things going, we stalled out. And it was a little bit disappointing, but we would go to the meetings, everyone would be excited, and then we'd be like, okay, so we're going to get together and do this. And then it would be, next month's meeting and we were like, well, what did we do? And we were kind of coming up flat. And I'm not making excuses for it, but it's
No,
just
I totally get it.
this is our reality as we're going
Yes,
through it. And
it is.
our unit, I think, saw more diverse faces this year than what we'd seen in any of the previous 3 years that I'd been on the board, though. So
That's
I
good.
am taking that as a victory. I am taking that we are making inroads and we are building trust with doing this. And, you know, there's a lot of hesitancy about parents who are showing up, and we're offering them a position on the board, or you want to be the vice president, we'll let you be the president, whatever you want to do, like just come on board and you can do this. And all of a sudden the screen goes blank.
Can we just say hello first and get to
But
know
I
you
mean,
some?
my work with our local unit, I think, has been rewarding in that I think that we're making progress.
Yeah.
And what my hopes are is that next year we can be at the doors during pickup and drop off, and we can say hi to parents, and we can engage them directly, and we can start to form those relationships and build that trust that's going to be necessary for them to say, oh, you guys are a good group of people and you are doing things that are in my best interest. And
Yeah,
I think it's worth my while to contribute to that as well. And so
right.
it's a long road.
Well, Craig, you said something important though, too, is that I saw a study where we're almost 2 years behind developmentally in most things, just because of what the pandemic has wielded. And so our kids' social emotional, our own social emotional needs, how we feel about things. Now we're jumping up again a little bit in COVID. And so if a PTA just had one go for the year, I'm telling you, it might be about all that people could manage and do because of what's happening. So, and we know our kids' social emotional needs are really, so while I can say data and give you the checklist that's the best practices, sometimes it's just getting people back together so they feel happy, connected, validated, and then maybe one other type of goal. But I would say pace yourself, because we're 2 years, almost 3 years out, and look at what we're still dealing with. So I totally don't begrudge anybody for just plotting it very carefully, and because we don't want to burn people up, and people have so many other issues that are pulling at them right now just to manage what's happening right now. Anybody else? Ronnie, were you raising your hand?
Yes, seems to have her hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, I just, I guess mainly what I wanted to talk about more so than anything. So at DSA, which now I'm getting ready to have a third child of our 4, graduating from there. And a lot of the work that we were previously doing, because now we have a new PTSA board, because a lot of the, because a lot of the people that were previously on the board, their children have graduated and things of that nature, so they're no longer at the school. But I find probably what's been the most challenging is, you know, people understanding the importance of this work, and that it's not just about putting on that nice, sweet face. It's about making sure that we remember to step out of our comfort zone so we can really do this work. And that's what's been the most challenging for me is, you know, people, well, you know, that doesn't make me feel so good, or different things like that. And I'm like, well, I understand, because that's a part of the world that I live in every day, is a space of being uncomfortable and having to always have to, how do I put it? Always having to prove my worth. Do you know what I mean? And that my abilities are just as much as someone else. And you know, it makes it a bit challenging, but I love doing it, because the thing of it is as we do the work and we get to know each other and get to build relationships with each other, what happens is we build that trust that needs to be built back. And that is so critically important, especially, in terms of getting leaders on the different units that are people of color as well. Because I mean, it's one thing to be comfortable with people that look like you and that are just like you, but it's another thing to step out of your comfort zone and learn how to love and appreciate others. I guess that's the wordage I would use. I mean, that's a really important part of it, because, I know some things have happened since my kids have been at DSA that I've been really uncomfortable with, but I sat in that uncomfortableness and learned to say, you know what? Just like I don't want people to other me, I shouldn't do it to other folks. I should be willing to step into being uncomfortable and ask those questions, because yes, we don't always say the right things, but it's so important that we say something. So we learn how to either correct it or just work with what we have and meet that person where they're at, and them meeting us where we're at as well. So
I have this activity called Cultural Cafe, and it's just saying the language of things that are challenging. It's the baby infancy, and everybody, some people have to start there because they just don't feel comfortable. But if you walk the earth as a person of color, it's like just a part of your being, and you have to do it. But the development of some other people, they may not be there, and so we have to have space for all of it. So one of the things I just wrote was a tools and activities, and that's one of the things I can send, that there's some practice that has to be done in the spaces first before you go out to other people, so that you just feel comfortable enough. I don't know if you ever feel total comfort, but you could feel better as you practice some, or say, what do we want to talk about that's kind of difficult, and how can we talk about it? So that's something I will add to the pot as well. I see another hand up before we go. Or it's the hand signal stuck up there. I don't know.
It's Anya's.
Okay.
Anya.
Are you there, Agnes? Okay, maybe.
She was having internet issues, so I'm not quite sure.
Okay. So we just had a couple of minutes, and I just wanted to really thank you for having myself and Dr. Hernandez. And this work is not, you will have to reach out to numbers of people to be able to continue the work. And so don't hesitate to do that. There's lots of resources and book. Yes, Annette.
I'm sorry. I know when you're through, I believe. Amy
Oh, no, I was just
going
saying,
to-
I
Okay.
really appreciate the process, and I hope that some of the tools will be helpful.
Sounds good. I believe Amy was going. Amy, were you planning to do any PTA?
Update.
Yeah, but that's okay. The time is, the stuff that you guys presented is great, and totally aligned with what what I was going to talk about with National PTA. Just I can put this information into like a into a document to send out to you guys, because it's like I don't want to keep you later than you are planning to be. But just in general, I mean, I think people come at this from very different perspectives, right? People are in different places, and as PTAs, I hope that we can all take people where they are and help them move a couple of steps forward, right? And for some people, that's kind of the focus of National PTA this year has been, there's no one way to PTA. There's a lot of ways, and so some people, you might be able to engage them in the DEI work through the ESSA piece, because it is an actual law that parents do have to be engaged on these issues. And if you're a Title I school, especially, you have to have a plan for parent engagement. That is part of the law. And so, you know, making sure that your school understands that that parent engagement needs to be meaningful to, you know, to be able to fulfill that aspect of the law is, you know, one way that you might be able to, you know, get some people started who are, you know, not necessarily, you know, just really excited about
Yeah.
diversity, equity, inclusion, but they don't also want to break the law, you know, speaking to principals, especially. In addition, the Colorado Department of Education requires that parents are involved, and there has to be parent engagement, especially in your your district accountability committee, and every school has to have an accountability committee that includes parents. And so that's another way to get people involved and kind of being able to ask those questions, kind of like about what you were talking about, like who are the kids who are struggling, you know, what are the percentage of staff that you know, that of color in the building, do those things match, you know, and then also being able to use the demographic data of your school to look at your PTA. You know, if, you know, 75% of your school is Hispanic and like 12% of your PTA is Hispanic, you know, that's a red flag to say, okay, so what do we need to be doing to engage,
Yeah.
right? If you have, you know, if you have like, you know, 30% of your school that's Black and you don't have one Black person on your board, there's a problem there. And so we need to be asking ourselves, how can we, you know, how can we invite people in different ways? Because a lot of people think PTA is a clique, right? And it shouldn't be that way. So how are we, you know, how are we making our meetings accessible? How are we training people for future leadership? How are we engaging people in both the traditional ways that we've done it before, but also in new ways, and trying to make those connections in different ways? I think that's definitely something that that National and Colorado PTA have been working on. National PTA also has centers for parent engagement, Center for Family Engagement. That's a really good resource. Looking at, and their whole thing is based on the 4 I's of transformative family engagement: inclusive, individualized, integrated, and impactful. PTA engagement, and that's their focus of their transformational family engagement, which goes right along with what Dr. Sampson was speaking about. And I think, you know, again, it's another way to kind of get people involved. And then finally, I would just say, you know, National PTA has a School of Excellence program. And one of the big components of the School of Excellence program is, you know, showing how you are engaging your families, you know, from underrepresented populations, but also, you know, engaging all parents. And so making sure, you know, if people are interested in, you know, showing that your school is a blue ribbon school or whatever it is that they want to call it, you know, that's another way to get some people involved who might not necessarily just do, you know, say, you know, DEI is like my focus. They might want to win awards. So, and in addition to that, National PTA has the Jan Harp, I think, Domine, I believe I don't know. It's like I read it, but I don't know how to pronounce it, you know. But those words are all for local units that have these great DEI plans, and they take them and they put them out to PTAs across the country to show, you know, exactly like the things that you guys have been talking about, how those things look in action. And so if you have a great DEI plan, I really encourage you to submit it once you get it going, so that you so that other people can learn from your experience. And so I can put all those links in the chat, but I can also give them to Ania's to get out to you guys. So just wanted
Has
to throw in.
Colorado ever shared their plans together in some sort of structured form?
Yes. So what happens at the National PTA conference every year, we have they award these plans for different reasons. Like they have
Okay.
different, like, so, you know, one might be you know, gender inclusiveness, you know,
Yeah.
is the focus, or, you know, Black excellence is another one that I've seen. You know, so like there are different aspects, you know, that people focus on,
Yeah.
and then they share those plans with the rest of the National PTA people at the conference. But then also they use those things to reach out throughout the year through both the National PTA leadership, but also through trainings that they do.
Yeah. Well, you already have it. You already have those
And
foundations.
Amy?
Yeah.
I wanted to say in the newsletter also, they have in the National PTA newsletter, they also have a category specifically for the equity or DEI work. And they have an area where they do webinars and all those things as well. So I think that's that's a good thing for people to go to, just to become familiar and aware of what's going on around them, especially with the different units or people that are on boards and stuff like that. So, because I make sure whenever I get one of the national newsletters, I always read through it. And,
Yeah, thank you so
you know,
much.
I even get hard copies of them. That's kind of exciting to me.
Yeah, that's great. Absolutely. That's awesome. And it's a great way to share with members too, who are not necessarily, super engaged at the higher levels. It's like this is something that, is going on across the country. I would also throw in Notes from the Backpack is the podcast, and they've done a lot of really good ones on the DEI work that people are doing. So, and they've got an archive. So if you like that, if you don't have time to read but you like to listen, that's another opportunity. So yeah, just and like I said, Colorado PTA really is very focused on doing this work and we want to help, we want to support. So if there are ways that we can be helpful, please do let us know, and we'd be glad to come in and do what we can to support the work that you're doing. Again, like all DEI work, it's not about us taking over, it's about us supporting you in what you are trying to do for your kids, your community, your school.
Great information. Okay. So that's all I have for this evening. And if there's anybody else before we go, I just really appreciate you continue to work with me, and Craig and Ronnie, let me know if you need anything else, and Agnes in terms of the work, but I think I've given you just about everything that I have.
Thank you
I
so
just wanted
much.
to say, I really think this has been an awesome presentation. The one thing that I do want to remind all of us that will help further the work is recognizing that as a committee, you need to get board approval for that work plan. And the beauty of that is that by collaborating and making sure the board is on pace and on same page as the committee, you hash it all out at that point so that you get that board approval for the work plan. Because once you got that board approval, you're pretty much ensured you're going to be able to move forward. You don't get that board approval, the committee can't proceed. That's just our reality. So I encourage all of you, make sure you bring your board members onto your committee if they're not there already. Hash it all out at that level. Get your board approval, and I would be fairly confident to say you're going to have smooth sailing. It's when we forget that as a PTA, that no committee has the ability to obligate the board of directors to move forward. So, thank you.